welcome back. It's a new episode of The Will to Be Weird. If you think that my voice sounds kind of weird this episode, it's because I just came back from the dentist and the whole left side of my mouth is super numb. So I don't know, I was trying to see if I can notice a difference in the audio, just recording and listening to it myself, and it doesn't sound that different, but I'm probably way more aware of it than you guys are. I thought I just gave you the heads up so you weren't like, why is this guy talking all weird and different than he normally does? So besides that, just back with another episode. This episode is going to focus on holotropic breath work. I mentioned in the last episode that I wanted to do a follow-up about that and kind of do a deep dive into that subject on its own. That's just one of many subjects that I'm trying to investigate in these coming episodes, but just start here, might as well just start first things first. And the way that I want to preface my discussion on this topic is that 2 weeks ago, I believe, I had the opportunity to participate in a guided holotropic breathwork workshop. A friend of mine has a friend who leads these workshops, and I was fortunate enough to not participate in the workshop live, but to have a recording of the guided meditation, so to speak. And so me and my friend listened to this guided meditation, this holotropic breathwork practice, and for me personally, it was my first time trying this practice out, and I heard about it before. I got into different types of breath work just this last year. Within the last 6 months, I think I started kind of experimenting with these things. So I started with Wim Hof, got into Wim Hof method. Super cool. I could do a whole episode on that, and I've spoken about Wim Hof method in my previous episode, talking about my quarantine experience. And so even before doing it during that time frame, I had been experimenting with Wim Hof method, and it's been just awesome. I've kind of I'm very new to the whole mindfulness, meditation, yoga, pranayama, breathwork practice, and I say that because even though I've been participating in those types of things off and on for maybe, I don't know, I want to say 2 years, maybe 3 years. There was a time where I was just kind of really just dabbling, just dipping my toes in it. There was a time when I was I don't even know if I'm really into this. This is popular and people are telling me about it and having good experiences, communicating those good experiences with me. And I'm just I don't really know. It seems just kind of very much like a fad, very much like a craze, and I wasn't sure whether I was into it or not. Any of that. I was just kind of even mildly, and sometimes in an extreme way, just totally hating on it. I was just not into it. But besides that, I've got into it more seriously, into the whole spectrum of different things. But for the purpose of this video, I kind of just want to talk about breath work, and that's why I mentioned Wim Hof. Some of the experiences that I've had on that sort of practice have been phenomenal. The first time I ever did Wim Hof was actually with this same person who exposed me to this holotropic breath work, and we were just cruising on a beach, and I just remember if I could sum it up, I'd remember feeling my whole body was electric, all of my the nerves and the blood and everything just felt electrified. There was this current, and I could actually feel the blood and everything just kind of pulsing and flowing through my whole body consciously, because it's happening whether you're conscious of it or not. Your body's just doing its thing. But in this experience, the difference was that I could feel it. I was conscious of the movement of my blood throughout my body, pumping from my heart and through the veins and arteries and all that, just stuff that you just normally do not think or feel consciously about. And beyond that, I've had several experiences on the Wim Hof method where I was like, I mean, there's not really any other words that I can use to describe it other than some sort of like a Kundalini awakening, like a rising of Kundalini energy. And one such experience that I'll relate to that is in Wim Hof, you have this period of time after your retention of breath, the total exhalation, retention for a period of time, and then after that period of retention, then you would do an inhalation and a retention for a period of, say, 30 seconds, where you're directing the energy of that retained inhalation of breath from the bottom of your spine up to your head. And throughout that process, throughout that like 30 seconds, and sometimes I found myself holding for longer than 30 seconds because I was actively feeling this rising, this activation, this awakening of energy flowing from the bottom of my spine up to the top of my head. One specific circumstance that I'm mentioning and referring to right now is, oh my God, it was just insane. Like, I literally felt like it was just so overwhelmingly like vibratory, so overwhelmingly awakening. It's as if the energy is always there. It's not that it's not there in other moments other than that. It's just that at other times it's asleep. It's this energy is latent. It's not alive. It's not moving. It's just sleeping. It's like a snake coiled up. And then in moments such as these, the energy then becomes active and alive and starts just like flowing upward, because we're directing it upward, or I was directing it upward from its sleeping position that I presume is at the base of the spine, all the way up into the top of my head and beyond. So that's Wim Hof. And the reason that I mentioned Wim Hof is because it's a breathing practice that is similar but not the same as holotropic breath work. And at this point, I'd like to get into specifically holotropic breath work. So me and my friend, we're sitting down, we got the recording on, and we're going through this practice. And to sum it up, I'd say that this holotropic breath work is different from Wim Hof in that it can, not that Wim Hof can't go on for 30 minutes, but this specific practice was like within the time frame of 30 minutes, and the actual the breathing itself takes place in such a way that you will breathe in. It's now that I think about it, it's always through the mouth. So like when I do Wim Hof, I actually do it through my nose. That's the inhalations are through my nose, but in this case, it's all through the mouth. So and that's like to your belly, and after that you're like, it's to your chest, and then you let all of that air go, not forcing it out, but just letting it flow out, like, so I'll demonstrate it again. It's like to the belly, to the chest, and then let it all go. And so you do that. That's the basics of the type of breath that you're doing throughout this practice. And I'm not a practitioner of this sort of breath work, so I wouldn't recommend that you necessarily follow my instruction. I'm just trying to give you an example because this is what I did, and so it gives me a way of talking about it beyond just words. I want to sort of give a physical, literal representation of what's going on. So anyway, that's the type of breathing. It goes on for a period of 30 minutes, and so you're just constantly doing this cycling of breaths over the period of 30 minutes. And at various points in that 30-minute time frame, the guided meditation will kind of bring up prompts that will allow you to express what you're feeling, or express what you're feeling as it relates to a certain type of prompt. And some of those prompts were built up around expressing a sound as it relates to joy, or expressing a sound as it relates to trauma or anger, or all these different things that you would be feeling or expressing, or that this practice will activate or kind of stir up. Because I have to mention that the whole purpose, I believe anyway, around this sort of practice is it takes these emotions, this energy, these feelings that you've kind of have stored, that you haven't actually like kind of worked through and express consciously, and allows those sorts of things that are just kind of been stuffed, so to speak, and allows those things to release. And the way that it was described in the practice was it's like an emotional massage. So you have all these things, like when you're getting a massage, you kind of are working out these things that are like kind of pent up, or there's things that are not moving, it's like this tightness, and so with this breathwork practice, it's like massaging the parts of your emotions that are tight and need to be released. There needs to be some sort of softness brought to that area so that it can be released. And without further ado, I kind of want to jump into my experience during those different prompts throughout the 30-minute practice. Let me see, give me a second so I can find my reflection on that somewhere in here. I've found that really it's best for me to write things down and then to relay my writing in the form of speaking it as it is on the podcast, because I have this stuff in my memory. It's not like I forgot about it, but me personally anyway, I find that when I write stuff down, it's just a lot more clear than it would be if I was to just try and bring it up off the top of my head. It looks like it's a little farther here. Got all kinds of shit going on here in this notebook. But yeah, just found it. So I'm gonna read this off to you, and hopefully it allows me to speak my experience a little clearer than it would be if I just spoke it off the top of my head. So I titled this entry into my journal, Reflection on Holotropic Breathing Session. First little point here is I felt the presence of the spirits of my ancestors. Without them, I wouldn't be here, and I am a culmination of the current summation of that specific thread of existence. Only a slightly divergent thread splitting from the thread of human existence and evolution. These spirits are always here and always will be, working with me and through me. I am a chance for their suffering to subside and be resolved, as well as a chance for their dreams to come true. And this specific entry here that I made was in response to a prompt during the practice where I was provoked to view my ancestors as like my team. And by that I mean that, like, when you would be referring to the spirit of your ancestors, it's like referring to basically like a board of directors over your life. You have like, you're the CEO, and then like all these like ancestor spirits are like these like people on your board of directors. So you're like, okay, I gotta do something here, and I need to like go back and refer to my team in order to get like all these different inputs, all these different areas of input, areas of expertise, so that I can like make moves in a way that is informed, So like, I don't have all the answers, I don't have all these different like specialties and areas of expertise. So I go back and I refer to my team and I'm like, yo, team, like, what do we do here? You know, like I want to get like all these different opinions from all these different uh, facets, uh, so that I can get this big picture analysis and then make moves based on that. That was just fascinating to me. Uh, it made me think about my ancestry and like my distant relatives of the past in such a different way, in a way that was more alive than dead. You know, like I had previously had this kind of perception that, like, you know, all these people they were alive at one point but they're dead now, you know, and like that may be true of their like physical selves, but me, like, I'm a culmination of all of that, that thread of existence, you know, from the very beginning until now. If those people didn't exist, then neither would I. And the fact that I exist mean that they do in fact still exist through me, rather than being dead and gone. Even though their physical bodies, their physical existence is dead and gone, the fact that I am here uh, means that they are too. And I thought that was awesome. You know, like I had previously kind of had a glimpse into that vision, but had never fully realized it until that point. At least I had never actually experienced it firsthand until that point. You know, I had a conceptual, intellectual perception of that idea, but I had never actually felt it experientially until that point in time, and that was just mind blowing. You know, like that's a big thing. It's like you can conceptually and intellectually grasp a topic, but to actually feel it and have an experiential to touch it experientially that's much more powerful in my opinion. I mean, maybe you have these intellectual, conceptual grasping of an idea, and then from that point you can jump off into the experiential. Who knows? I mean, who knows which comes first, or which it may be different depending on the person and the concept itself. But I personally, like, I have a lot of things that I grasp intellectually and philosophically, but to have an actual firsthand experience with it is invaluable. Whether or not you grasp it intellectually and philosophically beforehand is not really necessarily important. In my case, I have had that background beforehand, and then I had the experiential grasp of it afterwards, but it's not necessarily important. Yeah, so let me move on to the next little note here in my reflection. Universal oneness, pure joy, equanimity, the experience of being detached from the relative state of being and seeing things for what they truly are. It just is, neither pleasurable or distasteful. This is another experience that I had during this breathwork practice, where I was able to look at a thing, and the example that I'll give is that during the practice there was music playing. And normally what I would do is I would hear the music with my ears, and then I would make a judgment based on whether or not, like, I like this music or I don't like this music, or I have no opinion either way. Like, I'm just like, I don't like it, I don't not like it. It's just there. More often than not, it leans towards the I like this or I don't. And then based on whether I like it or I don't, I decide whether I'm enjoying it or it's causing me discomfort. Whether I'm enjoying it or it's like annoying, you know. And I found myself firmly positioned at this point in time in the it just is category. It's neither pleasurable or distasteful. I'm listening to this music playing in the background as the guided practice is being kind of played out, and I'm like, normally I would like listen to this music and be like, oh, this is weird, you know, or like I'd make a judgment of it. That's mainly, I think that's probably the best way to approach this this statement that I'm making, is that there's a lack of judgment. So I'm able to experience things through my sensory perception, in this case my ears, and I'm able to not place a judgment on it. I'm like, it just is. There's no reason for me to say this is weird or bad or good or pleasurable or distasteful. It just is. And that experience itself was so valuable to me because, as I said before, a lot of the time I'm in the judgment. I'm in the field of judgment. I'm in the experience of being judgmental, and I have felt that that oneness, that universal, pure joy, equanimity before, but never so strongly as I had in that moment. Moving on, the next little bullet point that I have here in my reflection is that forgiveness for all the judgment and suffering inflicted upon myself for not being someone else's depiction of good, the release of constricting falsehoods of self substituted for the pure and honest truth of who I really am. And so this is related to the second little bullet point there. It's judgment outside of myself and then judgment of myself internally. Both of those things, I came to this point of equanimity where I'm not judging myself, and I'm also not judging these things that I perceive to be external to myself. And so it was very powerful. Particularly, I want to say it was particularly powerful for me from an internal perspective, because I feel like I'm always judging myself. I'm always like trying to be what other people want me to be. This is a character defect of mine that I've become aware of over the last little while here, but it's been present in my life. Like, it's been a thread running through my whole life, and it's affected my whole life. I've always been placing judgment on myself based on what I think other people want to see, because I'm placing this judgment because I basically want people to like me. It's plain and simple, like I decide who I'm gonna be based on what I think people are gonna like, because I want to be liked. And I think this is something that human beings experience across the board, but I can only speak from my own experience. So what I'm saying is that throughout my life, I have placed judgment on myself for the purpose of being liked or accepted by other people. And it has had an effect on the pure and honest truth of who I really am. Because I'm trying to be what other people want me to be so that I can experience acceptance and be liked, I am, in a sense, not really being the pure and honest truth of who I really am. I'm letting this judgment based on my perception of what I think other people want to see and what other people want me to be corrupt that pure and honest truth of who I really am. And at this moment in time, during this breathwork practice, I was just like fully made aware of the fact that I'm placing all this judgment on myself all the time. And I was also able to come to this point of forgiveness for all the times in the past that I have ever placed this judgment on myself. And from that point on, regardless of whether I revisit that place of judgment, I have experienced the fact that I can, at any point in time, fully forgive myself for placing that judgment upon myself, and then I can move forward. And I think that this is the way that things work with a lot of personal growth, is that you have to, at one point in time, experience what it is to not do the thing that you are doing that's not productive, that's not creating an environment that you can grow positively as a person in your life. It's always having that experience and knowing what it is so that you can remind yourself, and you can kind of like come back to the middle, like at different points in time, you're going to stray from that middle ground. But if you have that experience of being in the middle ground, then you can always come back to it. And this has just been amazing because I feel like it's been like a huge breakthrough in the work that I've been doing on myself for some time now. I've been trying to get to this point, uh, this middle ground point with this judgment, this kind of whole concept of judgment, the self judgment, uh, for some time now. Because I wanted to work on it, but I just didn't know how to. I didn't perceive it firsthand, so that I didn't know how to remind myself to come back to it. I knew what I wanted to be, I knew where I wanted to be, but I just didn't know what it felt like, so therefore I didn't know how to place myself there. And this experience gave me the ability to firsthand, to perceive it firsthand, to experience it firsthand. So I have this reference point now of like how to return to the pure and honest truth of who I really am, how to return to a place of forgiveness for judgment and suffering inflicted upon myself for being someone else's depiction of good, and just to release the constricting falsehoods of myself. So with that being said, and that's just been, it's been a lot to take in. So I hope that you, as listeners, can understand what I'm saying and hopefully kind of relate this to the way that you feel within yourselves. But for me personally, it's just been such a powerful experience, and I'd highly recommend holotropic breath work to anyone. Obviously, there are certain restrictions because not everybody is the same. Everybody's different. You know, some people just can't participate in these sorts of things because they don't have the ability physically, or they're susceptible. They're different. They're different people physically, and so they're susceptible to certain negative side effects. So I'd highly recommend that anyone who's going to try and do this sort of thing look into it and have a knowledge of who you are and what you can and cannot do, you know, your limitations physically as a person. So I just want to put that out there because I don't want to, you know, fully, like, I endorse these sorts of things that I do because I've had positive experiences with them, but I just want to keep in mind for people listening that you need to have a very clear idea of who you are and what your physical limitations are, so that when you partake in something, you know what you're getting into. And that has a lot to do with doing due diligence on something before you like dive in head first. And I'm guilty of just kind of just like, I'm like, oh, this seems cool, so I'm just going to do it. But I think I kind of have an intuitive idea of who I am and what my limitations are in a physical sense. So I feel sort of an intuitive comfort, and then I jump into it based on an intuitive comfortability. So anyway, just want to put that out there. I just want to put that out there kind of as a disclaimer in a way. Like, I'm not telling you to go and do this. I'm not telling you to not go and do it. I'm just telling you the way that I experienced it and the positive effect that it had on me. So if you're into it, try it out. If you're not into it, don't. But if you are into it and you want to try it out, look inside yourself, know yourself, look into it, the practice itself, and do some research before you just jump in. You know, whether it's actually researching it, or whether it's just kind of like having a little powwow with yourself and deciding whether or not it's for you. But me personally, I'm a supporter of having knowledge or acquiring knowledge of a certain thing before I place judgment on it, or either just knowing something enough to make a decision or have an opinion. With that being said, that's basically all I have to say about holotropic breath work. If I participate in any more sessions in the future, I might kind of do another little shout out or like a throwback to this episode. But at this point, I kind of want to move on to the next topic of this episode of the podcast. And I haven't done a little story section in a while, so I'm stoked to do a little story here, because that's kind of how the podcast started out. It was more like a storytelling thing than this like kind of open, basically whatever's on my mind sort of thing, and it's evolved to that, from being just purely storytelling to whatever's on Josh's mind kind of thing. And I'm stoked to whoever have kind of stuck with me throughout that. If you're into what the podcast has become, or if you were more partial to what it was in its infancy, as I said, as this like purely storytelling thing, then cool. But in any case, I want to jump back into the storytelling mode. And with that being said, the story that I want to tell today, that I think has a particular relevance to the will to be weird, is when I was a little kid, I'd be in the airport, and I had this kind of like I wouldn't really call it paranoia. I had this sort of like a fear or an inclination to believe that in these rolling suitcases that people were carrying around in the airport, I thought that there were little people. I don't know like the politically correct term for people that are, you know, not normal sized, you know, people that are like small, you know, like abnormally small. So I don't really want to get into like the language of it, but basically I thought that when I was a kid that there were little people like in suitcases in the airport, that people were rolling around, these like rolling suitcases. Some people might have stashed a little person in them, you know, and like as a kid, I remember just like walking around in the airport with my parents thinking like, like what the fuck, you know, like is there actually a person in that suitcase? Like, and I fully was in the state of mind that I believed that it was a distinct possibility. I was like, yeah, there's definitely like one or more of these suitcases that have passed by me in this this time of walking through the airport. There's definitely a little person in one of those suitcases, for sure. That was like 8-year-old me was 100% sure that there was at least one suitcase with a little person in it that had passed by me in the time that I had been walking around the airport with my parents. And this idea kind of got brought back up to me within the last couple of days, because I was about to borrow a suitcase from a friend of mine, like a big rolling duffel bag. And he's like, yeah, it's big enough to fit a little person in it. And I was like, oh my God, dude, you just reminded me of this experience that I had when I was a little kid. I remember just like fully walking through the airport and kind of like just like, you know, glancing around, and then having the feeling, the distinct and fully the full belief that there is definitely a little person in one of these suitcases that have rolled past me as I've been walking through the airport. And I hope that doesn't like offend anyone. I don't really want to. I'm not trying to make a joke about people that are little, you know, for sure I'm not. But I just thought it was like a funny thought that I had when I was a kid, and I was reminded of it recently because of that statement that a friend of mine made when he's about to let me borrow his rolling duffel bag. He said that you could fit a little person in it, and it just brought me back. I was like, what? You know, like I just had that instant recollection of that experience, and it was like it's more than just like a recollection. It was more like I was brought back to that point in time when I experienced that thought first. And those types of experiences I have all the time, are not all I guess I have to correct myself, not all the time, but when I do have them, I'm always like fully blown away, because it's more than just like having a memory. It's like literally revisiting the memory and then experiencing it the way that I experienced it in the moment that the memory was created. And I talked about this actually beyond this specific story with a friend of mine, where I like fully had collapsed my memory of my time in high school to like I'd collapsed it down. I always kind of view time as like this accordion, where like at certain points the accordion is out like this and you can see in all the folds, But then at other times, like the accordion's closed and it's collapsed and you can't see all the folds. They're all kind of like collapsed into this somewhat flat object. And that's how I would describe this experience of, having something that sparks the memory and then being able to like unfold it and see in all of the crevices of that memory. One other specific example that I can give is I'm talking to my friend, as I just referenced before. I'm talking to my friend, and I'm talking about the experience of being in high school. And at that moment in time, I was fully able to unpack those 4 years or so and experience that memory in its wholeness, rather than having it like collapse down to it's like a zip file. It's compressed. I was able to kind of like unfold it and see all these little individual memories within the larger memory of like my life in high school. I was able to like look and see all these individual little specks, all these little blips on the timeline. And it's as if I was able to like choose a blip and zoom into it. And it's like, what the hell? This is crazy, And I'm firmly convinced that time, it kind of like can exist that way. It can exist as an accordion, like whether either compressed or expanded, and then you can like go and revisit memory from the perspective of like a firsthand experience, rather than just saying like, oh yeah, I remember when that happened. You rather than just having a thought in the present moment about something that happened in the past, you're able to experience that moment in the past from the perspective of who you were in that moment specifically. And it just blows my mind every time. And as I said, at first I was like, yeah, I have this happens all the time. But it doesn't happen all the time. It only happens in specific moments when I'm able to expand that accordion of memory and revisit specific memories from a firsthand point of view. Crazy stuff. I mean, I'd like to hear from anyone who has had similar experiences, because it's powerful for me to hear it from you rather than just like having this whole conversation in my mind, and that's why I'm sharing it here. And I kind of indirectly transitioned into this topic from my little storytelling segment there, but it's all good because I wanted to talk about this anyway. So we're here, we're doing it, we're fucking doing it. But with that being said, I feel like I've talked about a lot already, and then it's like 38 minutes in here. So to sum it all up, we had holotropic breathwork, and I talked a little bit about Wim Hof too. And then I jumped into this story about the little people in the suitcases at the airport. And now finally we're here talking about memory in its collapsible and expandable version of itself. And if you have anything to say about any of that, or anything else that I've previously talked about on another episode of the podcast, hit me up. Let me know what you think. Share your experiences, your thoughts, your comments, your opinions, whatever it may be. You can hit me up on Instagram. My Instagram account is under The Will to Be Weird, and that's WILL, the number 2, BEWEIRD. Will to Be Weird with the number 2 instead of the word 2 like TO. You can also contact me through my Anchor account here. You can do a voice message, which is really cool. I've got one of those so far, and it's been really cool because I can take that voice message that you submit to me and then include it in another episode, a coming episode of the podcast. So it's like you get to be on the podcast without actually being on it live. And if that's something you're into, like, hell yeah, submit a voice message. I'm super down with those. It's cool because then I can make you a part of the podcast, and it's not just me ranting, even though that's normally what it is all the time. And with that being said, I'm looking forward to having some guests on the podcast. I've had so many episodes here so far and no guests, and that's cool with me. But I also am still like super excited about having guests on the podcast. I haven't really made much of an effort to do that, but with that being said, like if you're interested in being a guest on the Will to Be Weird, hit me up too. We can do it over like Zoom. We can do it over like a video call. There's also a way that you can like do it as like a phone call, like just audio only. And the way that that works is I can like kind of tune you into Anchor through the app. We can both like kind of tune into the app, and then we can have a conversation as if we're having a phone call, but the phone call will be recorded. It'll be like an actual like audio podcast episode. So lots of opportunity there. But thank you so much for listening in. I really appreciate all my listeners, either new or my dedicated OGs, if there are any. Stoked either way. Just thanks for listening. Thanks for being a part of this, and stay tuned for more Will to Be Weird.